Now a little overview about downtown Geneva. Its history is that in the 1980s, it became part of the greater New York State Rust Belt, which means that as factories closed down, people lost their jobs, and as a result, the local downtown economy plummeted. Additionally, with the construction of Highways 5 and 20, travelers no longer needed to go through the town of Geneva, but instead could completely circumnavigate the town completely. This meant that people no longer stopped and shopped downtown. As a result, there was a huge proliferation of vacant storefronts. So store owners that were open in the 1990s noticed that Geneva kind of hit a sort of rock bottom. It was a notorious bad place to do business, and it was characterized by a lot of crime in the area. However, in the past 15 years, downtown Geneva's commercial landscape has done a complete 180. And there has been a huge proliferation of cafes and bars and restaurants and high-end stores, and this is a lot to do with low rent. This is also part and parcel due to two revitalization campaigns. The one is a Love Geneva campaign, which is just a general eat, shop, and support downtown. The second campaign is the Geneva Night Out, which is kind of a monthly outing to spur economic spending. Now, Geneva is also strategically posited as a tourist destination, which means that it's located in the heart of the wine tourism industry, and it's also advertised as, at least Seneca Lake is, as the trout fishing capital of New York State. It's also very near the Waterloo outlets, so local New Yorkers are also drawn to that and then stop in Geneva. So all this in combination results in people, mostly non-residents, stopping downtown and wining, dining, and being entertained, say, at the Smith Opera House. So this led me initially to two research questions. Primarily, is Geneva undergoing gentrification? And if so, what does this mean for Geneva residents, especially the locals? So this presentation is a culmination of previous and current research. Previously, it focused primarily on store interviews. It also utilized a 37-year historic analysis of commercial stores downtown produced by Irving Costa, and it also reviewed this against local census data to see if it was true. Presently, what I did was utilize surveys to test these previous research questions and hypotheses and see if it could be backed up with data. So in those initial discoveries, I found a couple of things. First of all, there is the new downtown customer, and they're primarily a summertime tourist who has a desire to consume experiences, right? And they have lots of disposable income to do so. Now, one store owner quoted that they do almost 50% more business in the summertime, and they really wait for the summertime to roll around, to have business start booming. However, in the 1990s, it was completely the opposite. Another store owner said they would hold their breath for the summertime to pass so that the HWS students would come back and business would resume. So what I believe is that the summertime customer has spurred demand for upscale spaces to accommodate these desires, to accommodate the desire to consume. And so if Geneva is gentrifying, it is not through the traditional influx of upscale residents moving to Geneva. Instead, it is through the change of the commercial landscape accommodating their desires. So this then spurred three questions that I followed up in the surveys. Primarily, do these trends continue in the off-season when it's not the summertime? And this is to say, has Geneva, downtown Geneva, been permanently reshaped in the image of the new downtown customer? Second, then how do residents or non-residents use this downtown space? And are there any other factors that explain this other than residency? So my method was to use surveys, and what I did was I located 17 high-end businesses to give out the surveys to their customers. Now their selection was based off a literature review which identifies consumer lifestyle choices as the primary driving force for gentrification. So these 17 stores were primarily all upscale. Now what I then did was use a formula to calculate the number of surveys each business would give out based on the amount of customers they served in the week. So an example here is that if you had 300 customers served in the week, you would end up getting 24 surveys. I then gave each store owner a quota to spread the surveys evenly across the business week. So here, if you had 24 surveys and you open 6 days a week, then you give out 4 surveys a day. Finally, in order to ensure as much random distribution as possible of the surveys, I told the store owners to give them out over the course of each day, so maybe at the top of the hour and bottom of this hour, and not to just give it to friends and family. So the survey itself was a quick 5 questions. It included some demographic information like your gender, your age, and your race. But it primarily focused on your residency and then the top 3 stores you were planning to visit, which they filled in for me. So for residency, you could fall into 3 categories. You're either a local Geneva resident, an HWS affiliate, a student, a faculty member, a staff member, or a non-resident, and then you can tell me where you were from, international, national, local, tri-state, etc. Now the reason why I took out HWS affiliates as its own category is because I believe that students and teachers are technically residents of HWS, but they may not be economically representative. And so if you look at the 2 cells below, you have the average household income in 2003 adjusted for inflation, 2006, $16. The average family income for Geneva residents is around $60,000. While HWS admissions claims that their accepted students for 2016 had a median family income of over $100,000. And granted, there is a wide range of students that come to HWS from many different types of socioeconomic backgrounds. And so even if I kind of factor in an average grant of $30,000, it still comes into a general average well above the median household average for Geneva locals. So the results of the survey that I got back was over 300 surveys, and that produced a 5% margin of error, which means that the following information I can say with a confidence interval of 89 to 90%, meaning that there's a 10% chance that I'm wasting your time and this is all due to random chance. So primarily what I found is that the consumers downtown are made up of residents and non-residents, with only 10% of HWS affiliates. Now this goes against what store owners thought, that there's an equal 1/3 distribution across the board of residents, HWS, and non-residents consuming, going to their stores. Additionally, what I found is that it was way skewed in terms of females. It was about 60-40, and what this showed to me was that this is actually in line with the literature review, which says that in gentrified enclaves, females are usually a faster rising population and a bigger population than are the male side. As for race, it was kind of not so interesting. However, it was in line with the census data. There was 87% whites, and that was exactly in line with the census. Blacks were underrepresented, Hispanics were overrepresented, but I think that's part and parcel due to how the census categorizes Hispanics as either white or they self-categorize as African American. And then 1% Asian, which was also in line.
National census or Geneva census?
Geneva census, excluding the Ontario counties. So this is just Geneva itself, so there's no skew in the data. As for age, there's a 1/3 distribution across the board, which is nice and even. So this is what it produced. So of those 17 high-end shops, the customers filled out the survey saying what are the other 3 places of business you have already come from or you're planning to go to. And that produced a total network of 56 shops. 31 of those shops are exclusively upscale, and you can see the breakdown on the side there. It's primarily made up of high-end stores, followed by bars, cafes, and then restaurants. So about half of the stores that the average downtown customer consumed or went to were high-end, and I'll get back to this at the end. And you can see the little green pins here are just all the 56 shops, and it expands outwards, and then the different labels of all the different high-end stores. Linden Street in particular being right in the middle there. So the downtown demographic of what I found for the upscale stores is the most interesting. The patrons of upscale stores were primarily female, non-residents, and those over 50 years old. But when I combine those 3 attributes together, I can create a consumer profile that says that female non-residents over 50 years old are 82.4% likely to consume at these high-end stores. But what about these non-HWS affiliated Geneva residents? Well, it's not to say they've totally disappeared. They still consume at high-end stores at about 50%. And while they're the second biggest category, they fall behind non-residents at 12.5%. So they're still there, but they're trailing along. So what's happening? I believe that Geneva's new downtown customer still does exist and has already shaped Geneva in its image. but they are still relegated to summertime tourism. So in the off-season, upscale stores become the primary site for gentrification, and they are disproportionately perpetuated and frequented by these textbook gentrifying groups, being those female non-residents over 50. So is Geneva gentrifying? Well, according to the definition of gentrification, it is the influx of both capital and people into an otherwise economically depressed and previously undesirable location, all of which so far checks out. Additionally, is characterized by low barriers of entry in the form of cheap rent, and it has the incentive of a strategic geographic location, and also has the presence of patrons willing to consume new and hip things, like a microbrewery or a nice glass of wine on Linden Street. So I believe, yes, Geneva is undergoing an atypical form of consumption-based gentrification that is spurred by the new downtown customer in the summertime, but perpetuated by a few affluent groups in the off-season. So what does this ultimately mean for these non-HWS affiliated Geneva residents? Well, while residents are totally evicted from the downtown because no one's moving there and driving up rent prices, I believe they threaten to become further marginalized from downtown, especially if this proliferation of upscale businesses continues to grow, and if they cannot gain access to this economic loop. So two things would need to happen for locals to start getting into trouble. One, these upscale locations would need to start comprising an overwhelming proportion of the typical downtown Geneva shoppers' shopping network. So that number 31 upscale businesses would have to start trending towards the 56 side. Additionally, residents would need to stop shopping at these upscale stores, meaning that their current 48, 49% would need to start trending towards zero. And that could happen if the stores either become too expensive or the downtown culture becomes socially exclusive. So for me, this little model that I've created is like the ticking time bomb for gentrification. Right now, we're at 55.4% exclusivity, which means the average shopper will shop at half, or at half the stores they shop at will be exclusively upscale. And the more that increases, the less shops there are that cater to local residents, and the result is downtown Geneva will start not to become a place for local residents. Instead, will be permanently shaped in the image of these other affluent customers. Thank you very much.